This is Yesenia Hall. Police say her boyfriend, Juan Rivas, stabbed her in the neck, stomach, and back, leading to her death. Her 16-year-old son was also stabbed and is now recovering. The whole ordeal causing a bloody mess throughout the building. Hall had 2 other children also home at the time, luckily unharmed. Rivas pleaded
if the person you love most in the world was being killed right in front of you. Would you freeze? Would you run? Or would you charge headfirst into the mouth of madness, knowing full well you might not come back out? On a quiet Saturday morning in the Highbridge section of the Bronx, a 16-year-old boy was forced to answer that question in the worst possible way. This isn't just another story of domestic violence, another statistic about a woman killed by a man who claimed to love her. This is a story about a kid who tried to be a hero, a kid who ran toward the danger instead of away from it. And before we get to what happened inside that apartment at 956 Sherman Avenue, before we get to the blood and the screams and the silence that followed, this is True Crime Unraveled. We want to take a quick moment to say thank you to every single one of you watching, listening, sharing your thoughts in the comments, and also to our super thanks gifters. We see you. We read every word you write. Whether you're watching on YouTube at True Crime Unraveled or catching us on Facebook and TikTok at True Crime Unraveled TV, you are the reason we keep telling these stories. The theories, the memories, the outrage, the compassion, keep it coming. It means more than you know. To understand what was lost on February 28th, 2026, you have to understand Yesenia Hall. Not just as a victim, but as a person. She was 42 years old. A mother of 3, a woman who, despite the hand she'd been dealt, kept fighting for something better. Yesenia had been dealing with scoliosis for years, a painful condition that had put her through multiple back surgeries. She was on disability, unable to work the kind of job she used to, but she refused to let that define her. She was taking classes online at U.S. Career Institute, studying medical claims and billing. She was so close to a new career. Something she could do from home, something that would give her kids a better life. Her brother, Edwin Maldonado, described her best. He said she was really about her kids, no matter what. Grade A students, all of them. That was Yesenia's doing. She was on top of them, pushing them, loving them. Her cousin remembered her as jolly, funny, the kind of person who'd defend anybody from a bully on the block. If there was an injustice, she was the first to spring into action. Think about that. A woman who spent her life defending others. A woman who couldn't walk away from a fight if someone else was getting hurt. That instinct, that fierce loyalty, it ran in the family. Then there was Juan Rivas, 45 years old. On paper, he had skills. He was a licensed airplane mechanic. That's not nothing. That takes training, precision, a certain kind of intelligence. But the license doesn't matter if you can't pass a background check. And Rivas had a record that made real employment nearly impossible. His brother-in-law, Edwin, said he was willing to help the guy, get him into therapy, clean him up, because Yesenia saw something in him worth saving. She tried to get him help. She tried to be that person for him. But here's what the neighbors saw. Here's what they heard through those thin apartment walls. Chantrice Diamond, the 17-year-old girl next door, said that in public, Rivas and Yesenia looked like the perfect couple. All smiles, all charm, but behind closed doors, it was a different movie entirely. She heard him scream at Yesenia, heard him say things like, "I will strangle you. I will beat you up." Another neighbor, who didn't want to give his name, put it bluntly. He said Rivas was crazy, aggressive, possessive, jealous. He was everything in the book. The police knew about him too. Over the past 10 years, Rivas had been arrested 6 times, mostly assault. Prosecutors later detailed multiple domestic incidents between him and Yesenia. 5 of them involved physical violence. 5 times the system had a chance to intervene. He had a prior violent felony conviction, 2 prior misdemeanor convictions. He'd even failed to appear in court before. Edwin Maldonado said his sister had received multiple injuries from this man over the years. "We tried so much," he said. "I know the city can only do so much when it becomes domestic." The list is long. February 28th, 2026. Around 6:30 in the morning, The Bronx was just starting to wake up. Streetlights still humming. Most people still in bed. Inside that third-floor apartment on Sherman Avenue, something went terribly wrong. It started with noise, movements, like somebody was thrown against a wall, furniture being shifted around. Neighbor Shanae hadn't woke up to the commotion. She heard someone saying, "No, no, no, no." It didn't sound like an adult, probably a teenager. Next door, 17-year-old Chantrice Diamond was half asleep when she heard it. A scream, then the sound of something heavy falling, like a dresser. Then she heard him, the boyfriend, yelling at the top of his lungs, "I'm gonna stab you." What happened next is the stuff of nightmares. Yesenia's adult daughter, Jayla Maldonado, was in the apartment. Her 16-year-old brother was there. Her 12-year-old brother was there too. They heard their mother's screams. They ran to her bedroom. And what they saw through that doorway will haunt them forever. Juan Rivas was in the room. He had a knife, and he was using it on their mother. Now, remember what Yesenia's cousin said about her. She was the first one to spring into action if she saw injustice. That apple didn't fall far from the tree, because in that moment, the 16-year-old boy didn't think. He just moved. Jayla later wrote about it on a GoFundMe page. She said her brother pushed her out of the way. He physically moved her from the danger so he could get to his mom. He tried to blanket her, his uncle said. Tried to cover her, protect her, shield her from the blade. He was trying to save his mother. But you can't reason with a man holding a knife. You can't de-escalate someone who's already crossed that line. Rivas turned on the boy. He stabbed him in the neck, in the shoulder, in the cheek. The kid went down, bleeding, gasping, but still alive. Then Rivas turned back to Yesenia. He stabbed her repeatedly, in the chest, in the neck, in the torso. Jayla, seeing her brother wounded, seeing her mother under attack, did the only thing she could. She called 911. And Yesenia, in her final moments, she looked at her children. Her last words, according to Jayla, were, "I'm sorry. I'm dying. I'm sorry." A mother's instinct, even as the life drained out of her, to apologize to her kids for leaving them, for not being able to stay. Then silence. Chantrice Diamond, listening from next door, heard the boyfriend yelling, heard the woman screaming in pain, heard her scream, "Stop, stop." Then she heard Yesenia say, "I am gonna die, I'm gonna die." And about 2 minutes later, nothing. Just silence. That silence was broken by the sound of the front door closing. Rivas was leaving. Chantrice and her mother waited. They were terrified. What if he was still out there? What if he saw them? Chantrice later said something that chills you to the bone. She said, "If I'd have walked out and he was fleeing the scene, I'm a witness, so he would have stabbed me too." When they finally opened their door, they saw it. Blood. Coming from underneath Yesenia's apartment door. Flowing out into the hallway. A dark, horrifying river. Police arrived around 6:40 a.m. Officers from the 44th precinct followed that trail of blood. It led them to the apartment. When they forced the door open, they found a scene of unimaginable violence. Blood on the walls. Blood on the floor leading to the bedroom. Pools of it. Inside, Yesenia Hall was unresponsive, stabbed beyond saving. Nearby, her 16-year-old son was still alive, but just barely. Stabbed in the neck and back, bleeding heavily. Medics rushed them both to NYC Health and Hospitals Lincoln. But for Yesenia, it was too late. She was pronounced dead at the hospital. Her son, thank God, was listed in stable condition. The maniac, as one report called him, was gone. But he didn't get far. Here's where it gets almost darkly ironic. Rivas fled the apartment, but he didn't just run. He changed his clothes first. Authorities later said he was last seen wearing a neon vest and a hard hat near a construction site at 163rd Street and College Avenue, trying to blend in, trying to disappear into a crowd of working men. But here's the thing about violence. It's messy, and it leaves marks. Hours later, Rivas showed up at a local hospital. He was seeking treatment for his own wounds. We don't know exactly how he got hurt. Maybe in the struggle, maybe self-inflicted. But his right hand was bandaged at the wrist and palm when he later appeared in court. He was arrested around 2:30 that afternoon.
Back here in the Bronx, police make an arrest in a deadly stabbing in Concourse Village. Police say they have arrested and charged Juan Rivas in the death of Yesenia Hall. She and her teenage son were both brutally stabbed in the neck inside of an apartment building on Sherman Avenue just before 7 o'clock yesterday morning. Hall died at the hospital, and the 16-year-old, her son, is still recovering. We spoke with a neighbor next door who says this is not the first time they heard commotion coming from the apartment.
Did you see her come out?
No, I didn't see anything. Like I said, I was in my room sleeping. I didn't see nothing.
She didn't ask for help?
My daughter heard the commotion. She came and got me. It's like something's not right, Mommy.
Rivas faces several charges in this attack, including murder, attempted murder, and manslaughter. No word on when he'll face a judge.
On Sunday, March 1st, 2026, Juan Rivas stood in Bronx criminal court, his hand wrapped in bandages. Judge Yadira Gonzalez-Taylor looked at the charges: murder, attempted murder, assault, weapons possession, and given his history, given the brutality of the crime, she ordered him held without bail at Rikers Island. Prosecutors laid out the case. They described the prior domestic incidents, the 5 violent clashes police had responded to. They detailed the night before the murder and the morning of. They told the court about the children in the apartment, the 12-year-old who was also there, the 16-year-old who was stabbed trying to save his mom, the daughter who watched it all happen and called for help. Outside the courtroom, the family spoke. Edwin Maldonado, Yesenia's brother, a commercial airline pilot and retired Army officer, stood tall despite the grief. He talked about his nephew, the hero. He's going to get to live, Edwin said. Thank God he is out of surgery. He is in stable condition. But there was a cost. The wound to the boy's neck left him temporarily unable to speak. He couldn't talk. He could only write. From his hospital bed, the teenager scrawled out a note. It was simple. It was grateful. It said, "Thank you so much, doctor. You're a lifesaver, no joke." A kid who just watched his mother murdered, who took a knife to the neck, still had the presence of mind to thank the people saving his life. Think about that. Jayla, his sister, couldn't sleep. She said what she saw was vivid. It kept replaying over and over. On Instagram, she wrote, "Witnessing my mother and brother get hurt like that is extremely heartbreaking. I can't stop replaying it over and over again. I miss you, Mama, and I hope you're watching over us. I know you were so scared." And then there was the 12-year-old, the youngest. He was in the apartment that morning too. But the family waited to tell him his mother was gone. The next day, when everyone gathered, he saw all the people and asked if there was a party. Edwin had to pull him into a private room. He was in total shock, Edwin said, eyes wide open with very small tears, nervous and scared. Let's sit with that for a moment. A 12-year-old boy who was in that apartment during the attack, who heard the screams, who maybe saw things no child should ever see, had to be told days later that his mother wasn't coming back. And his brother, his hero, couldn't even speak to comfort him. He could only write. The community reacted the way communities do. Candles outside the building, handwritten notes, fundraisers, grief shared in fragments. Neighbors who once only exchanged greetings now stood together in mourning. One neighbor, Kim Antonio, remembered Yesenia as very ambitious, very bright, very brilliant.
A Bronx mother stabbed to death inside of her home Saturday morning. Police say by her boyfriend. News 12's Lindsay Tanny has the story from her family and neighbors.
A loving mother, helpful neighbor, and friend who lost her life far too soon. This is 42-year-old Yesenia Hall. Her family sent us this photo as they're grieving the mother of 3 who we're told had such a bright future.
She was very young, very ambitious, very bright, brilliant.
Hall was stabbed to death Saturday inside her home in Concourse Village. The suspect, her boyfriend, 45-year-old Juan Rivas. He's facing multiple charges, including second-degree murder, manslaughter, and endangering the welfare of a child, among others. According to the criminal complaint, 3 children were there. Hall's 16-year-old son was also stabbed. His sister says she saw Rivas stab her brother with a kitchen knife multiple times, causing him to bleed in his back shoulder and cheek. Luckily, he is recovering. When our crews arrived, there was blood all over the floor and a bloody knife left behind. Days later, there's still blood on the wall next to the staircase. This tragedy affecting her neighbors who remember her being so kind. Kim Antonio calling for more attention to domestic violence cases.
Another Facebook user, a childhood friend, wrote, "I have no words to explain what's happening in this world. One of my childhood friends growing in Washington Heights. My heart hurts and no one deserved this. At the crime scene, investigators found the weapon, a knife stained with blood left behind." That evidence, along with the testimony of the children, the neighbors, the physical evidence of blood everywhere, built a case that was hard to refute. Rivas's attempt to flee, to change clothes, to hide, it all pointed to a man who knew exactly what he'd done. Edwin Maldonado said it best. "I know the city can only do so much when it becomes domestic, but you have to wonder if one of those 5 calls had led to something more, if a prior conviction had meant longer jail time, if the restraining order that should have been in place actually existed. Could Yesenia still be here?" Her brother also revealed something else. Yesenia had tried to get Rivas help. Therapy. Cleaning him up. Edwin was willing to help him get a job, despite his record. And Yesenia, with her bad back, her online classes, her kids, was stuck in the middle of it. Jayla, in her GoFundMe post, made one thing crystal clear. She wrote, "I would never blame my mother for her domestic violence situation ever. Because that's the trap, isn't it? The victim blaming that always follows. Why didn't she leave? Why did she stay?" Jayla wanted the world to know that her mother was extremely loved, and that leaving is never as simple as it looks from the outside. Now, as of this recording, Rivas is sitting in Rikers Island, awaiting his next court date. He's pleaded not guilty, but the evidence is damning. The knife recovered, the blood everywhere, the witnesses, including the children who saw him do it, the neighbor who heard him threaten to stab Yesenia moments before, his flight from the scene, his change of clothes, his attempt to hide, and then his arrest hours later at a hospital. The judge's decision to hold him without bail sends a clear message. This is not a man who gets to walk the streets. This is not a man who gets to pose a threat to anyone ever again. But for Yesenia's family, for her children, that's cold comfort. The justice system might lock him away, but it won't bring her back. Let's talk about that 16-year-old boy for a minute. The hero. The one who can't speak right now but writes. The one who, when he heard his mother screaming, didn't hesitate. He ran toward the sound. He pushed his sister out of the way. He tried to cover his mom with his own body. That kind of courage is extraordinary, but it comes with a cost that goes far beyond the physical. Psychologists will tell you that survivors of this kind of trauma carry it forever. He didn't just get stabbed. He watched his mother die. He heard her last words. He saw the man who was supposed to be a part of their family turn into a monster. And now, while his body heals, his mind has to process all of that. The nightmares, the flashbacks, the guilt of surviving when she didn't, the anger, the grief. He's 16. He should be worried about homework and video games and who likes who. Instead, he's writing notes from a hospital bed because a knife wound stole his voice. His uncle Edwin said it best. He's going to get to live. Thank God. But living isn't the same as being okay. And for this kid, for his siblings, for the entire family, okay is a long way off. The ripple effect of violence is that it doesn't just kill one person. It wounds everyone around them, sometimes in ways that never fully heal. This man, Rivas, has spread terror beyond his own apartment. He made an entire building afraid to open their doors. He turned a home into a crime scene and a neighborhood into a trauma ward. So what happens now? Rivas faces the rest of his life in prison. Given his prior record, given the brutality of this crime, given that children were present and one was injured, a judge and jury are likely to throw the book at him. But even a life sentence is just a legal conclusion. It doesn't answer the why. Why did it happen? We may never fully know. The family says there was no known trigger, no specific argument that set him off. But domestic violence doesn't always need a trigger. Sometimes it's just a slow burn that finally explodes. Sometimes it's about control. Sometimes it's about a man who can't hold down a job, can't feel like a man, and takes it out on the woman who stayed. Sometimes it's about the weapon, the access, the moment when anger meets opportunity. The police found the murder weapon. That's crucial. In cases like this, a recovered knife with blood evidence can be the difference between a conviction and a walk. It ties the suspect to the scene. It corroborates the witnesses. It tells the story in a way words alone can't. And with that knife, with the blood, with the testimony of the children and the neighbors, the prosecution has a mountain of evidence to present. This case is a brutal reminder that domestic violence is never just private. It spills out. It affects children. It affects neighbors. It leaves blood under doors for the whole building to see. Yesenia Hall was 42 years old. She was a mother, a student, a friend, a woman with scoliosis who kept fighting, a woman who tried to help the man who killed her. She was jolly. She was funny. She defended people from bullies. And on February 28th, 2026, in an apartment on Sherman Avenue in the Bronx, she ran out of chances. Her son, the 16-year-old, is still here. He can't talk right now, but he writes, and one day he'll find his voice again. When he does, he'll have a story to tell. A story about love and terror. About a mother who said I'm sorry as she died. About a sister who called 911. About a 12-year-old brother who thought there was a party. And about a moment when he chose to be a hero, even though it cost him everything. Before we go, we want to hear from you. What do you think should happen to Juan Rivas? Do you think the system failed Yesenia by not acting on those 5 prior domestic incidents? And how do we, as a society, do a better job of protecting people before it's too late? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We read every single one. If this story moved you, if it made you angry or sad or made you want to hug your own kids a little tighter, give this video a thumbs up. It really does help more people find these stories. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. We're here every day, digging into the cases that need to be remembered. On YouTube, we're True Crime Unraveled. On Facebook and TikTok, it's True Crime Unraveled TV. Same channel, same commitment to the truth. For now, rest in peace, Yesenia Hall. And to her son, the hero who ran toward the danger, we're all rooting for you. Keep writing, keep fighting, keep living. This has been True Crime Unraveled.